Sage Montgomery loved this restaurant for its cozy atmosphere and the dim lights that gave everything a touch of mystery. The Golden Lily was located in a historic building, and each table was separated from the others by twisted cast iron partitions with climbing artificial ivy. It was like sitting in your own little garden. She slowly stirred her herbal tea with the spoon, distractedly watching the other patrons. It was Friday night, and the restaurant was full. A soft murmur of voices, clinking glasses, light laughter. Waiters in white shirts glided between the tables, handling trays with skill. She had arrived before the agreed-upon time, a habit developed during years of working in a gallery where punctuality often determined the success of a transaction. Her Montgomery Gallery was just 2 blocks away in the same historic red brick building. For the past 15 years, this gallery had been the center of her life, her pride, her creation. She saw her reflection in the mirrored panel of the wall, a stylish woman with a straight back, wearing a strict dark blue dress and her brown hair pulled back in a low bun. The wrinkles at the corners of her eyes had become a little more visible in recent months, but her gaze remained the same, attentive and sharp. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed movement at the entrance. Thatcher, her husband, was entering the restaurant with his usual confident stride, tall, slender, in an impeccably tailored suit. 20 years of marriage, and her heart still fluttered when she saw him like that, handsome, successful, striking. Now, however, the feeling was bittersweet. He spotted her and walked towards the table, lifting the corners of his lips in that special half-smile he used to reserve for her. She knew that smile had long ago become a mask, a familiar expression for the public. "Sorry I'm late," he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. He smelled of expensive perfume, and faintly of other perfumes of women. There were urgent matters at the gallery, of course. Sage smiled with the same practiced smile. "I understand. Sadie was working late tonight." She deliberately pronounced the name with indifference, as if she were talking about any of her employees. Thatcher froze for a split second, but then relaxed. "Yes, we're preparing a new exhibition. There's a lot to organize." The waiter brought the menus, and they began talking about the dishes. From the outside, they probably looked like a normal, ordinary couple who had decided to spend the evening at a restaurant. No one would have guessed that inside, Sage was stirring with the anticipation of an imminent storm. She knew it was going to happen tonight. She knew it from the way Thatcher avoided looking her in the eyes, from the way he rubbed his calf, a gesture that betrayed his nervousness, the way he ordered a whiskey even though he didn't usually drink strong liquor on Fridays. So, when the sound of high heels announced Sadie Blackwood's arrival, Sage was prepared. She didn't even turn her head while she continued eating her salad quietly. When a tall, blonde woman in a scarlet dress stopped beside their table. "Darling," Sadie's loud, sonorous voice made diners at neighboring tables turn around. "I thought it would be fair to tell you in person. Your husband is filing for divorce today." The restaurant went silent, the kind of silence that occurs before a storm when the air vibrates with tension. Sage wiped her lips with her napkin and slowly looked at Sadie. She stood with her arm at her side, a triumphant smile on her painted lips, her makeup flawless, her hair perfect, her dress designer. She looked like a winner. "Sage, Thatcher began, but she raised her hand and stopped him. "How kind, Sadie." Sage took her phone out of her purse. "Then it's time I showed you something interesting." She opened her photo gallery and extended the phone on the table. On the screen was a photograph of a painting, Bouquet of Peonies, by Mary Cassatt, whose original they had sold in the gallery a month ago for a fabulous sum. And beside it was a photograph of the same painting, but taken from a different angle, where the traces of the forgery were clearly visible. Sadie paled, her perfect mask cracked, and fear peeked through the fissures. "That's not all." Sage swiped the screen, showing the next images. "Here are documents of the painting's provenance, both real and fake, bank statements, correspondence with a lot and many more interesting things." Thatcher looked confused from the phone to Sadie and back again. "What does this mean?" His voice trembled. "Sadie, darling, it means," Sage stood up from the table, "that your charming mistress has been using our gallery to launder money by selling forgeries. And if she doesn't disappear from our lives in the next 24 hours, these documents will end up in the hands of the FBI." She fastened her purse and threw a light coat over her shoulders. "Put the bill on my account. Thatcher, I believe you have something to talk about with Miss Blackwood." And Sage Montgomery walked out of the restaurant, feeling the stares of all those present. Her heels clicked on the parquet floor with clarity and confidence, like a metronome. Only when she was outside did she allow herself to take a deep breath. feeling the cool night air fill her lungs. The first act had been flawless. Now, all that was left was to wait for the reactions of the main actors. The Montgomery Gallery opened at 10 a.m., but Sage always arrived an hour early. She loved that time when the sunlight that came through the tall Victorian windows created whimsical patterns on the walls. The old parquet floor creaked beneath her heels, and the air was perfumed with the faint scent of lilies, her favorite flowers, which were always in a tall vase by the entrance. That April morning, she walked through the corridors to check how the paintings for the new exhibition were being hung. Her gallery specialized in American artists from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And each painting was carefully selected and calibrated. Sage stopped in front of a work by Childe Hassam, an impressionistic cityscape of rainy New York from the beginning of the last century. The painting always reminded her of the day when she and Thatcher decided to buy this building for a gallery. That was 15 years ago. Thatcher had just been promoted in an investment company, and she had left her job as a curator at the Museum of Modern Art to pursue her dream. They invested all their savings, took out a loan, and for the first year, they slept on an inflatable mattress in a small apartment, saving every last cent, but the gallery had been worth it. Sage remembered her first major sale, a small work by Mary Cassatt. She remembered how her hands trembled when she wrote her first check to an employee. How Thatcher and she had popped open a bottle of champagne when the gallery had first broken even. The bell on the main door chimed. Sage turned around. It was Martha, her head receptionist, who had been working here almost since the opening. "Good morning, Mrs. Montgomery. Mr. Montgomery wanted me to tell you that he'll be late. He's meeting with a potential partner." Sage nodded. Lately, Thatcher was dedicating himself more and more to the administrative side of the business, leaving her with the creative side. It made sense. He had a degree in business administration and connections in financial circles. Although sometimes she missed the times when they would discuss each acquisition, each exhibition together. At 11 a.m., the gallery was filled with the usual sounds, the footsteps of visitors, hushed conversations, ringing phones. Sage had a consultation with a regular client when Thatcher appeared. He wasn't alone. Beside him walked a tall, fair-haired woman of about 35 years old, dressed in a stylish beige suit. She moved with the grace of a ballerina and examined the paintings with the professional gaze of an expert. "Darling," Thatcher said to Sage, "I'd like to introduce you to Sadie Blackwood. Sadie is an art dealer from Chicago, specializing in American painting. Sadie is interested in working with our gallery." Sage shook her hand, observing that Sadie's palm was slightly cold and very dry. "I am flattered, Miss Blackwood. Thatcher has told me about you. We met last week at the Sotheby's auction." Sadie smiled, showing her white teeth, and discovered many common interests in the art world. Thatcher seemed enthusiastic. "Sadie has great connections with private collectors. She can help us take things to the next level." Sage watched Sadie study Summer Day by Winslow Homer, one of the most valuable paintings in their collection. There was something about the way she looked at the painting, as if she was looking at more than just its artistic value. "A beautiful work," Sadie said without taking her eyes off the painting. "You know, I have a client who has been looking for something like this for a long time. Perhaps we could discuss the terms of cooperation over lunch." "Great idea," Thatcher interjected. "Sage, are you joining us?" "Unfortunately, I have an appointment with the restorer." Sage lied, not knowing why, "but I'm sure you'll be fine discussing the details without me." She watched her husband and the woman in the beige suit leave. Something scratched at her inside, something inappropriate about this image. Perhaps the way Sadie casually touched Thatcher's elbow as they walked towards the exit. Or the way she leaned slightly towards him as he opened the door. For the rest of the day, Sage couldn't shake off that vague unease. She attributed it to her usual distrust of new partners. She had seen enough con artists and swindlers in her 15 years in the gallery business. In the evening, while checking her email, she found Sadie's business card, which she had left on the receptionist's counter. White, smooth cardstock, embossed letters, Sadie Blackwood, art consultant, and below, the address of a gallery in Chicago. Sage twirled the business card between her fingers and put it in her desk drawer. She didn't know yet that that day would be the beginning of a story that would change their lives forever. Spring turned into summer, and Sadie Blackwood became an almost regular visitor to the Montgomery Gallery. She appeared 2 or 3 times a week, always impeccably dressed, always with new ideas and suggestions. Thatcher consulted her more and more about the development of the business. And Sage couldn't help admitting that some of her suggestions were really on the mark. In early June, Sadie organized the sale of a rare Mary Cassatt work to a private collector. And the amount of the commission made Sage forget her suspicions for a while. A series of successful transactions followed from the West Coast, and Sadie's clients became very interested in their collection. "It's magic," said Thatcher during dinner, pushing his fork around on an almost untouched plate. "Do you realize that she has access to Japanese collectors? It's a completely new market for us." Sage noticed that her husband had barely touched his special lasagna. In fact, he was eating less and less at home and spending more time at business dinners. "What did you think of the story about the gallery in Chicago?" she asked, watching his reaction carefully. "What story?" Thatcher frowned, sipping his wine. "I was checking the address of her gallery. The building was sold for offices 2 years ago." "Ah." He waved his hand. Sadie explained it. They had moved to another neighborhood. They didn't have time to update their business cards. "You're too suspicious, darling." Sage remained silent. She didn't mention that she had also checked the new address, which was a massage parlor. Sadie knew how to make people comfortable. She did it with mastery. Almost imperceptibly. A compliment here, a look there, a casual caress, an understanding smile. Martha, her severe receptionist, started leaving her fresh coffee. James, the appraiser, consulted with her about the attribution of the paintings. Even Sage sometimes surprised herself by almost believing the image a successful art dealer with an impeccable reputation and contacts. Almost. If it weren't for the small details that caught her attention. One day she heard Sadie talking on the phone in an empty gallery. Her voice was different. Rough, with a slight southern accent that Sage hadn't noticed before. The conversation stopped as soon as Sadie noticed her presence. On another occasion, she realized that she was examining the alarm system a bit too closely for a simple art dealer. And when Sage had unexpectedly entered her husband's office, Sadie had hurriedly minimized some documents on her laptop screen. But what worried her the most was the change in Thatcher. He had become distracted. He could be on the phone for hours, answering random questions. There were new habits. He started shaving twice a day, changed his perfume, went to the gym more often. The ties that Sage had given him every Christmas were left hanging in his closet. And now he wore more cheerful models. And in their bedroom, there was a faint smell of someone else's perfume, embedded in his shirts and jackets. Sage recognized the aroma. She had seen it on Sadie's desk. "Tonight, we have an important dinner with potential investors," Thatcher said one night as he knotted his tie in front of the mirror. "Don't wait up for me. It might be late." "Will Sadie be there too?" asked Sage, watching his reflection. He froze for a moment. "Yes, she organized the meeting." "Why?" "For nothing." Sage adjusted his shirt collar. "I was just wondering, since when our family business depends so much on the opinion of a stranger." "She's not an intruder," he said sharply. "Thanks to her, our sales have increased by 40% in the last quarter. And is that the only reason you spend so much time with her?" Thatcher turned away, his face closed. "Don't start, Sage. It's just business." He left, leaving behind a trail of new perfume and reticence. Sage went to the window, watching him get into the car. A minute later, a taxi stopped on the curb, and Cassidy got out in a tight black dress. She got into Thatcher's car, and they drove away. Sage took out her phone and dialed a number. "Hello, David," she said to her old friend from the art fraud unit. "Remember when you suggested we have dinner like in the old days? Maybe tonight?" She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, but her intuition, honed after years of working with art and people, was screaming danger, and Sage had learned to trust that feeling. 2 days later, she noticed the first anomaly in the documentation of a new painting that Sadie had brought a small discrepancy in the dates that most people would have overlooked. But not Sage Montgomery. If it hadn't been for the coincidence, Sage would never have known the truth. That morning, she was going through old catalogs to prepare a routine check of records. The summer rain was drumming against the windows of the gallery. The gallery created a cozy background noise. On the desk was an album of works by Mary Cassatt. Sage was going to update the description of one of the paintings on the gallery's website. As she glanced through the pages, she stopped at a reproduction of Bouquet of Peonies, the same painting they had sold a month ago through Sadie. Something made her freeze. Sage blinked, staring at the image. She took out her phone and opened the folder with the photos of recent sales. The same photo, the same bouquet, the same shades of pink and green, almost identical. She moved the lamp closer and held the album to the light. In the reproduction in the album, one of the peonies cast a slightly different shadow. a subtle difference that could be attributed to the printing process. But Sage had worked with paintings all her life. Her eye, trained over the years, was very sharp for details. Martha called, pressing the intercom button. "Could you bring me the complete file of the last Cassatt work?" The documentation was impeccable. Provenance, history of ownership, expert reports. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect. Sage opened the safe and took out a folder of photos taken with ultraviolet light, a standard procedure before any major purchase. They had been taken by James, their valuation specialist. She spread the photos out on the table and picked up a magnifying glass. There it was, in the lower right corner, almost on the frame. There was a subtle difference in the texture of the paint. It was as if the artist had hesitated for a moment before applying the brushstroke. Mary Cassatt never hesitated. Her heart beat faster. Sage took out her phone and dialed a number. "David, it's me again. Remember we talked about the oddities in the paperwork? I need your help." Unofficially, he arrived an hour later. David Ramirez, the expert in detecting counterfeit bills, hadn't changed in the years they hadn't seen each other. The same crumpled jacket, the same thin-rimmed glasses. They had met when Sage worked at the museum, and since then, they had consulted each other from time to time on difficult cases. "Nice work," he whistled, studying the photos. "If you hadn't shown him to me, I wouldn't have noticed. Someone with a lot of talent. And very brazen. How serious is this, considering the value of the deal?" David took off his glasses and cleaned them with the edge of his shirt. 10 years in federal prison if they're caught. Have you checked the other works that went through this trafficker? She shook her head. "Not yet. I didn't want to draw attention." "Okay." He took from his briefcase a device that looked like a flashlight. "Let's see what we have in the gallery right now." They spent 3 hours in the vaults. David quietly guided his device over the paintings, making notes from time to time in his notebook. When they finished, his face was serious. 3 forgeries, he said, handing her the list. "They all went through your gallery in the last 4 months. All since that CD of yours appeared." Sage sank into a chair. 3 forgeries, almost $500,000. What am I supposed to do? Keep quiet. For starters, David put a hand on her shoulder. If it's an organized group, they could be dangerous. I'll start an informal investigation. Keep an eye on your new employee. And be careful. When he left, Sage remained sitting in the empty gallery for a long time. Outside the window, it was getting dark and the rain was increasing. Somewhere upstairs, water was dripping. The roof needed to be repaired. But it wasn't worth it. The phone rang. "Thatcher, darling, I'm sorry, I'll be late again today. Sadie and I found a wonderful Winslow homework. I have to meet with the owner right now." His voice sounded calm. "Of course. Take your time." She hung up the phone and took Siddy's business card from her desk drawer. She ran her finger over the embossed letters. A question crowded in her mind. Did Thatcher know? Was he involved in the plan, or was he also a victim of skillful manipulation? In 15 years, she and her husband had built an impeccable reputation. The Montgomery Gallery was synonymous with quality and reliability. And now everything could come crashing down because of a woman who had come into their lives only a few months ago. Sage stood up and went to the window. In the reflection, she saw her face, calm and serene. She knew what she had to do. But first, she had to understand the scope of the problem. And most importantly, know which side her husband was on. When you deal with art, you learn to be patient. Sage decided to proceed carefully, methodically, like a restorer removing layer after layer of later additions from an old painting. She created a password-protected file in her office where she began to compile all the information about the transactions she had made through Sadie, dates, amounts, names of the buyers. At first glance, everything seemed impeccable, but now Sage knew where to look. David put her in touch with Eleanor Price, a specialist in technical appraisals of paintings. They met in a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, away from the places that Sadie frequented. The quality of the forgeries is incredible. Eleanor stirred her coffee while looking over Sage's shoulder. They use old canvases, authentic pigments. They've even learned how to age the canvases artificially, so that no expert notices. How do they get them across the border? Sage leaned forward. They usually declare them as modern copies. Eleanor took a folder from her worn briefcase. Here, take a look. These are photos of the forgeries we've discovered in the last year. Look at the caption here. Sage studied the photos and felt a chill. The handwriting was familiar. The same subtle imperfections in the brushstrokes. The same way of imitating the aging of the canvas. They work as a group. continued Eleanor, an artist who makes the copies, the specialist who ages the materials, an expert in documents, and of course, the seller, who is usually a charismatic person with impeccable manners and contacts in the art world, like Sadie. Thought Sage, beautiful, self-confident, and able to make people feel comfortable. That night she stayed late in the gallery after everyone had left. She checked the security cameras. Sadie was often alone in Thatcher's office. What was she doing there? Sage opened the office with her own key, sat down at her husband's computer, no changes in the password. Same wedding date. She checked his browser history, lots of requests for appraisals of American Impressionist paintings. In the email, correspondence with potential buyers, everything seemed normal, too normal. The next day she followed Sadie during her lunch break. She got into a taxi, and Sage took another, giving the driver the address. Follow that silver Toyota Camry, please. The taxi took her to an old warehouse in an industrial area. Sadie went inside, stayed there for about an hour, and left. Sage took a photo of the building and sent the address to David. In the afternoon, she received a response. The warehouse is rented by Artworks Shipping. Officially, it's a company that transports works of art. We'll check the documentation. A week later, Sage noticed that Sadie was making some changes to the gallery's database, small adjustments to the descriptions of the works. Purchase dates, provenance details. Individually, nothing out of the ordinary. Together, it was a whole system. Can I get paint samples from suspected works? Asked Eleanor the next time they met. Too risky. Sage shook her head. Keep an eye on everyone who gets close to the paintings, especially those who go through her. Then we have to wait. Eleanor finished her coffee. Sooner or later they will make a mistake. They always do. When she got home, Sage found a message from Thatcher on her answering machine. I'm sorry, important meeting with a client tonight. Don't wait for me for dinner. She looked out the window and contemplated the city's sunset. Somewhere in an expensive restaurant. Her husband was having dinner with Sadie. Was he really talking business? Her phone vibrated, a message from David. I found some interesting information about Artworks Shipping. Let's meet tomorrow. Sage replied with a short, yes. She felt that she was close to a lead, but she was prepared for the truth. In the bedroom, she took a box of old photographs from the closet. Their wedding, the gallery's opening, their first major deal, all the photos of her and Thatcher. Happy, young, and hopeful. Now everything could come crashing down. But she had to know the truth for her own sake. For the gallery, for the sake of everything they had built in those 15 years. Sage put the photos back in the box. Tomorrow, she would know more. For now, she had to stay calm and keep watching. After all, the most important thing in art is attention to detail. They had been living in this house for 20 years. But Sage had only just realized that the floorboards on the first floor creaked. Every footstep echoed with the silent groan of the wood. It was mainly at night, when Thatcher was coming home later and later. That night, she was sitting in the darkness of the living room when she heard the front door open. The clock showed 1:30. Thatcher smelled of whiskey and Sadie's familiar perfume. Tough day? Asked Sage, switching on the desk lamp. He flinched. God, you scared me. What are you doing up? Working on the catalogue. How was the meeting with the Japanese investors? Thatcher paused for a moment, loosening his tie. It went well. They're interested in our Impressionist collection. Sage knew he was lying. 2 hours ago, she had received a message from her informant in art circles. Thatcher had been seen in Marcos' restaurant with Sadie. They were sitting in a corner, holding hands. Tomorrow there's an important meeting, he said, avoiding looking at her. I might be late. Of course, she replied. Will Sadie be with you? Yes, she has good contacts with this client. In the morning, Sage looked at the photos from the last few months, where they appeared together at corporate events. How hadn't she noticed before? The looks, the casual touches, the way they always ended up next to each other. Sadie was at the gallery almost every day. She brought another painting, one of Winslow Homer's early pieces. A seascape, a fascinating work, said Sage, studying the canvas. Where is it from? From a private collection in the Midwest, said Sadie, with an indifferent wave of her hand. The owner prefers to remain anonymous, like all her anonymous sellers, thought Sage. That same afternoon, she sent photos of the painting to Eleanor. The response came 2 days later. The pigments are modern, artificially aged, definitely a forgery. Sage started to notice other details. Thatcher's new phone, which he never left unattended. The long business calls during which he would leave the room. The business trips he announced at the last minute. One day, she found a key card from the Riverside Hotel in his jacket pocket. That same day, Sadi cancelled an appointment at the gallery, citing a migraine. David continued his investigation. Artworks shipping is linked to 3 similar cases in other cities. Same scheme: infiltration into the gallery, substitution of originals with quality copies, sale of originals through fake people, and the money passed through offshore companies. A very sophisticated scheme. Professional work. Sage collected documents, photos, CCTV recordings, and created a second password-protected email account where she sent all the evidence. In the gallery, she pretended not to notice anything. She smiled at Sadi, spoke to her about future exhibitions, observed how she charmed her clients, and how confidently she spoke about art. Thatcher was shining in her presence. He began to take better care of himself, bought a new suit, joined a gym. It was as if he was trying to get rid of 15 years of marriage. "You've changed," Sage said to him one day during breakfast. "In what way?" He frowned, without taking his eyes off his phone. "Different. Younger somehow. I'm just exercising more." He finished his coffee and stood up. "I'm sorry, I'm late for a meeting." She watched him walk away, with his straight back and confident stride, like when they were young, when they opened the gallery. In the afternoon, she received a message from Eleanor. "I found a workshop where they make copies. Do you want to see the documents?" They met at the same cafe. Eleanor put a folder of photographs on the table. "Here you can see the characteristic traits of the work. The same handwriting as in your forgeries." Sage studied the photos and felt that the last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Now she had it all: proof of the forgeries, the money laundering scheme, and the links to the criminal organization. There remained the last question: what to do with this information? At home, she found a note from Thatcher, 2 days in Chicago. Important negotiations. The bedroom smelled of foreign perfume. He had forgotten to air out the room after Sadi had been here. Her hair clip was on the nightstand. Sage went to the window. In the reflection, she saw the woman who still loved her husband, who had built a whole life with him, and who now had to decide how to protect what they had built from a woman determined to destroy everything. Her phone vibrated: a message from David. "The FBI is interested in the case. We need to meet." She answered with a brief, "Tomorrow," and looked at the photograph she had on the dressing table, her and Thatcher. On the day of the gallery's opening. Young, happy, full of hope. Now she knew what she had to do. All that was left was to wait for the opportune moment. The conference room at the FBI headquarters was small and uncomfortable. David spread out on the table the photos and documents he had collected in the last few weeks. As Sage contemplated that mosaic of evidence, the image became clearer and more terrifying. Sadi Blackwood isn't even her real name. David showed her the photo folder. Her real name is Catherine Barton. She has used at least 4 different identities in the last 5 years. The photos were still of the same Sadi, but with different hairstyles and clothes. It's incredible how makeup and gestures can completely change a person. "We found contacts with galleries in Europe," David continued. "Milan, Paris, Berlin. It's the same pattern everywhere." She introduces herself as a successful art dealer, gains their trust, and organizes sales of forgeries through renowned galleries. Sage picked up one of the photographs. Sadi in a stylish black dress at the opening of an exhibition in Milan. Next to her was an older man, the owner of a well-known gallery. A few months after the photo was taken, the gallery closed because of a forgery scandal. And this is more interesting. David put the printouts of the bank transactions in front of her. The money goes through a network of offshore companies. The final recipient is a group specializing in art forgeries based in Eastern Europe. Preliminary estimates are around $4 million in the last 3 years. And that's only what we've been able to track. Sage felt nauseous. $4 million? How much of that went through her gallery? There's more. David paused. We've investigated her background. 2 years ago, there was a similar case in Chicago. The owner of the gallery fell in love with her, divorced his wife. A month after the divorce, several $1 million worth of originals were stolen from the gallery. They disappeared. They were replaced with copies. Sage looked at the gray sky through the window. History was repeating itself. Only this time, her gallery was going to be the victim. There's one more thing. David pulled out the last folder. Remember the building she went to? We put surveillance there. There's a workshop. And you know what's interesting? Every week they brought in chemicals for aging the canvases. The supplier was a company registered in the name of a Russian mafia boss. He put surveillance photos in front of her, Trucks unloading boxes. People in work clothes, the usual routine of a warehouse. But now Sage saw something more behind it. A well-oiled criminal enterprise. "We can't arrest them yet," said David. "We need conclusive evidence. The fact that the forgeries were sold through your gallery. I can help." Sage took out her phone. "I have security recordings. And something else." She showed him photos of documents she had secretly taken from Thatcher's office, falsified authenticity certificates. Fake provenances. Letters from non-existent collectors. "That's good." David nodded. "But we need more. We have to catch them red-handed." "She's preparing a big deal," said Sage. "A collection of American Impressionists. Supposedly from a private collection in Boston. When will it be?" "In 2 weeks. Preliminary estimate, around $5 million. David whistled. "Seriously? And all forgeries?" "From what I saw in the paperwork. Yes." They talked for another hour, going over the details of the operation. When Sage left the FBI building, it started to rain. She stood under the awning and watched as the drops crashed against the pavement. At night, Sage sat in her home office going over the paperwork. On the table was a photo of her wedding. 20 years together, 20 years of trust, of love, of shared hopes. Now everything was falling apart because of a woman for whom their lives were just another target. Another damage in a criminal scheme. Sage opened the safe and took out a folder with evidence. Soon, very soon, the moment would come when all that had to be used. She would have to be prepared. And she would be. A light drizzle fell all afternoon. Sage was sitting in a chair by the fireplace when she heard the front door open. It was about 9 o'clock, an unusually early hour for Thatcher lately. He entered the living room with his shoulders strangely erect. He was wearing a new dark blue suit. Expensive. Not one of the ones they used to buy together. Surely Cassidy had chosen it. "We need to talk," he said, remaining standing. Sage put the book aside. She had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it, and still, somewhere inside her, something broke. "I'm in love with another woman." His voice sounded dull. "Cassidy, I know," Sage said quietly. She blinked. "How long?" "Long enough." Thatcher strode across the room and stopped at the window. The city lights flickered behind the glass, blurred by the rain. "I want a divorce." "Sage, it's not fair for you to keep living like this." She stared at his back. So familiar for 20 years. She had fallen asleep with her back to him, feeling the warmth of his body. "It's not fair," he repeated. "Cassidy understands me. She makes me feel alive. We talk about art, about the future." "The future," Sage repeated. She had a lump in her throat. She turned around. "I'm sorry. I know this sounds terrible. But I have to be honest." Honest, she thought. If he only knew how much dishonesty was hidden behind the smile of his new love. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," Thatcher continued. "We can settle things civilly. The gallery will remain a joint business, with Sadie as a partner." Sage couldn't help a bitter chuckle. "She's an excellent professional. You've seen for yourself how our sales have grown." Sage stood up, walked to the bar, and poured herself a whiskey. Her hands were trembling slightly, but she managed. "I'll move out in a week," she said. "I've already found an apartment overlooking the river." She added mentally, "An apartment that Sadie and he must have chosen together." "What do you want me to say?" Sage turned to him and felt tears running down her cheeks. Real tears. She didn't have to pretend. "I don't know." He looked confused. "Maybe that you understand." "I understand." She took a sip of whiskey. "I understand that 20 years of marriage means nothing in the face of the charms of a young woman." Sage. "No. Really. I understand." His voice trembled. "You're in love. You're happy. How can I stand in the way of your happiness?" She sank into the chair, covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders were shaking with sobs. Thatcher walked awkwardly to her side. "I'm so sorry. Go," she whispered. "Please, go." When the door closed, Sage wiped her eyes, took out her phone, and dialed a number. "David, I've got it all. Everything is going as planned." She looked out the window. Outside, Thatcher was getting into his car. A minute later, a taxi stopped, and Cassidy got out. She got into the car with Thatcher. They hugged. They kissed. Sage watched them drive away. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from Eleanor. "The paperwork is ready. The forensics have confirmed it's a fake." She replied, "Great. We are waiting for the big deal." Then she poured herself another whiskey, sat in her chair, and lit the fireplace. Outside the window, it was still drizzling. Tomorrow she would arrive at the gallery with eyes red from crying. She would be distracted, depressed. Everyone would whisper behind her back, feeling sorry for her. She had been eliminated. The path was clear. Let them celebrate. Let them think she had lost. Sage had a plan, and it was beginning to unfold. The week after Thatcher left was a blur. Sage deliberately stayed away from the gallery for a few days, letting the rumors circulate. When she finally returned, the staff looked away, and Martha furtively wiped away tears. Cassidy, on the other hand, was literally radiant. She had occupied the office next to Thatcher's and now spent most of the day going in and out of his office. "Sage, darling," she said, popping into her office after lunch. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Her false concern made her want to wash her hands with soap and water. Sage nodded, trying to look depressed. "I know how hard this is for you." Sidi sat on the edge of the table. "But business is business. We need to discuss some changes in the management of the gallery." "What kind of changes?" Sidi took out a folder. "Thatcher and I believe the gallery needs a new direction. A modern vision." She handed her the papers. Sage scanned them. A reorganization plan. A new management structure. Of course, she wasn't listed on the organizational chart. "You want me to leave?" "Oh no, no." Sidi waved her hands playfully. "Maybe you should take a break. Get some rest. Recover. And in the meantime, Thatcher and I will take down what we have built for 20 years. A shadow of irritation appeared on Sidi's face. "Look, Sage, let's be honest. You've lost. Thatcher is with me now. Soon the gallery will be mine too. You can leave amicably with compensation. Or we'll find a way to make you leave." Her voice became harsh. "I have connections, Sage. I have contacts. I can make it so that no gallery in the country wants to do business with you." Sage lowered her eyes, her hands clasped in her lap. "Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a reasonable way out." Sidi stood up. "Think about it. You have a week." When she left, Sage took out her phone and turned on the recording. Sidi's threats were recorded loud and clear. "Thatcher came to the gallery that afternoon. He seemed ashamed." "Sidi said you were talking about reorganization?" "Yes." His voice held a trace of bitterness. "Your lady is very direct. She wants what's best. She has a lot of experience in ruining other people's lives." Thatcher sighed. "Don't be dramatic. It's just business." "Of course." Sage turned to the window. "It's all business." The next day, she discovered that her access to the gallery database had been restricted. A day later, a folder with important documents disappeared. By the end of the week, the staff began receiving orders directly from Sidi without going through her. "You'll have to put up with it," Sidi told her when she bumped into her in the hallway. "Or it'll get tough." At night, Sage received a letter from one of her most important clients. He was backing out, without giving explanations. Another followed, and then another. "She's putting pressure on your clients," said David when they met in the usual cafe. "She's using her contacts to isolate you." "Let her." Sage smiled. "It will only help us. The more confident she feels, the more mistakes she'll make. But it could seriously damage the business. The business can be rebuilt, but not the reputation of selling forgeries." At home, she found a note from Thatcher. He would pick up his last things over the weekend. Sage stared at his handwriting. So familiar, and thought about the ease with which 20 years of life could turn into a few lines of paper. The phone rang. "Eleanor, they're making a new batch of forgeries. A big one. It looks like they're getting ready for the big deal." "Great," said Sage. "Then it will all be over soon." She went to the window. In the reflection, she saw a woman who no longer seemed broken. There was a dangerous gleam in her eyes. The game was coming to an end, and Sage knew that the one who faked best would win. And she had an advantage in the art of faking. She wasn't playing for money or power. She was playing for justice. Sage was sitting in her office going over the documents for the Boston collection when a message arrived from Eleanor. This time, the expert had sent not just a suspicion but a full report on the painting, Bouquet of Peonies, by Mary Cassatt. The same painting that had started her chase. The lab smelled of coffee and chemicals. Eleanor spread the results of her investigation on the table. "Here," she pointed to the pictures under the microscope. "There are traces of artificial aging on the canvas. And this," she took out another image, "is a paint sample from the workshop we were following. It matches perfectly." Sage remembered the warehouse in the industrial district that Sidi visited regularly. Now it all fit. "I checked the documentation of the rest of the paintings that went through Sidi." Eleanor continued. 3 of the works are definitely forgeries. The same ones we suspected in the beginning." It was then that David appeared. He had brought the results of the inspection of the shipment of artworks. Look, he explained, all the supplies of chemicals for aging canvases go through this company. And the owner is the same offshore company through which the money from the sales passes. Sage took out her laptop. Here's the surveillance recording. Cassidy is a regular at the warehouse. And here's the paperwork I found in the gallery database. The dates don't match. The provenance has been manipulated. She opened the last file. And these are invoices for a new set of paintings. Supposedly from a private collection in Boston. I've checked it all. The paperwork is dated before. When is the deal scheduled? David asked. In 3 days. I saw the contract in Thatcher's office. The amount is about $5 million. The phone vibrated. A message from Thatcher. I need to talk about the upcoming deal. See you at the gallery. They want me out of the sale, said Sage. Sadie had already tried. She had gathered all the documentation. Photos of the forgeries, forensic results, bank statements, camera recordings. Now she had irrefutable proof. Be careful, warned David. Don't show them that you know anything. Sage nodded. In 3 days, it would all be over. She had evidence of at least 3 cases of forgeries sold through her gallery. That should be enough. All that was left was to wait for the transaction itself and catch Sadie red-handed. The Golden Lily had always been known for its sophisticated old-world ambience. Twisted cast-iron partitions with faux ivy created cozy islands of intimacy. And the soft glow of the vintage sconces added a special charm to the space. Sage loved this place. It was where she and Thatcher celebrated every wedding anniversary. Every major gallery transaction. She had deliberately chosen a table in the center of the room, where all eyes would be on them. On Friday nights, the colorful local society gathered, gallery owners, artists, collectors. You could hear the clinking of glasses, subdued laughter, and conversations about art. Sage quietly stirred her herbal tea, watching the other patrons, in her impeccable navy blue dress and brown hair pulled back in a low bun. She had her usual elegant and discreet look. Only in the corner of her eye was a new expression forming. A mixture of determination and underlying pain. Thatcher appeared at exactly the agreed-upon time. Tall, slender, in a suit that fit him perfectly, just as she had loved him 20 years ago. He walked to the table with his confident stride, lifting the corners of his lips in his usual half-smile. Sorry I'm late, he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. He smelled of expensive perfume and faintly of other perfumes. There followed a casual conversation about gallery matters. Sage responded calmly, almost distantly, counting the minutes inwardly. She knew it would happen tonight. She knew it from the way Thatcher avoided looking directly at her. From the way he nervously fiddled with his cufflinks, a gesture that betrayed his excitement. The click of high heels on the parquet floor announced the arrival of Cassidy Blackwood. Sage didn't even turn her head and continued eating her salad quietly. She felt the restaurant fall silent as all eyes turned to the tall blonde in the scarlet dress who had stopped at their table. Darling, Siddy's loud, sonorous voice echoed in the silent room. I thought it would be fair to tell you in person. Your husband is going to file for divorce today. In the silence that followed, she heard the clink of a spoon against a teacup. Sage wiped her lips with her napkin and slowly looked up. Siddy stood with her arm at her side and a triumphant smile on her impeccably painted lips. The personification of a winner. Perfectly coiffed, designer-dressed, self-confident. Sage. Thatcher began, but she stopped him with a slight gesture of her hand. How kind, Siddy. Sage took her phone out of her purse. Then it's time I showed you something interesting. She opened the photo gallery and held the phone on the table. On the screen was a photograph of a painting, Bouquet of Peonies, by Mary Cassatt, whose original they had sold in the gallery a month ago. And next to it was a photo of the same painting from a different angle, where the signs of forgery were clearly visible. Siddy's smile trembled. Paleness showed through her impeccable makeup. That's not all. Sage scrolled calmly through the photos. Here are the documents of the painting's provenance. Real and fake, bank statements, correspondence with the buyers, and many, many other interesting things. Thatcher looked confused from the phone to Siddy. What does this mean? Siddy, darling, it means, Sage stood up from the table, that your charming mistress has been using our gallery to launder money by selling forgeries. At that moment, the front doors of the restaurant opened, and 4 FBI agents, led by David, entered the room. Siddy shook herself and headed for the exit, but the path was blocked. Catherine, David showed his badge. You are under arrest on suspicion of grand fraud and money laundering. The click of the handcuff sounded incredibly loud in the silent restaurant. Siddy didn't fight back. She just gave Sage a look of impotent rage. You have the right to remain silent. The agent's voice was firm as Sadi was led out of the room. Anything you say may be used against you in a court of law. Sage fastened her purse and threw her coat over her shoulders. In the silence, her heels clicked clearly on the parquet floor, like a metronome counting the end of a story and the beginning of another. She walked out and took a deep breath of the evening air. Somewhere in the distance, a police siren wailed as they took Sadi to the federal prison. Tomorrow, all the local newspapers would report on it, the head of an international art forgery ring arrested. But that would be tomorrow. For now, Sage Montgomery walked through the night city, feeling the tension of the last few months fade with each step. She had saved the gallery, saved her reputation, arrested the criminals, and although her personal life had been shattered, she knew that the right decision was not always easy, but it was always still the right one. A week had passed since Sadi's arrest. The gallery was buzzing with the press, the police, background checks. Sage had spent long hours in the office assisting in the investigation of the forged works. That morning she was organizing another file of documents when Thatcher appeared in the doorway. He was gaunt, with shadows under his eyes, and his once impeccable suit looked crumpled. Can I come in? His voice sounded unfamiliar, tentative. Sage nodded without taking her eyes off the papers. There was a long silence in the office. I was an idiot, he finally said, sinking into the visitor's chair. A blind, narcissistic idiot. Yes, you were, Sage agreed calmly, making notes on the papers. You know what's worse? Thatcher ran his hand over his face. I really fell in love with her. The image she created, an intelligent, brilliant woman who understood art, and in the process, I almost ruined the work of our lives. He shuddered at those words. Sage, I didn't even realize the magnitude of the matter. When the agents showed me all the documents, all the evidence, you thought I was just jealous. He finally looked up, that it was just the hysteria of a jilted wife. I'm so sorry. His voice trembled. God, you must hate me so much. She put down her pen. I don't hate you, Thatcher. That would be too easy. I'm disappointed, and I'm hurt. 20 years isn't just a number. It's a part of myself that can't be erased. It started to rain outside the window. The drops pattered. Thatcher stood up and walked to the window. Remember when we opened the gallery? It was raining then too. You said it was a good sign. That nature blesses a new beginning. I remember, she answered quietly. Then, we were a team. We could. He turned around. We could try to start again. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But, no, Thatcher. Sage shook her head. There are things that can't be glued back together. You can only pick up the pieces and create something new. What will happen to the gallery? Will it still be our business? We will maintain a professional relationship for the sake of everything we have built. But the personal, she paused. The personal ended the moment you chose her. He lowered his head. I know. It's just, I can't believe it ended like this. What did you want? For me to forgive the betrayal? To turn a blind eye to the ease with which you were willing to destroy what we had built for years? The bitterness broke into her voice for the first time. Thatcher flinched as if he had been struck. You're right. I have no right to apologize. He headed for the door but stopped in the doorway. You know what's worse? I just realized what a treasure I've lost. You're an amazing woman, Sage, strong, intelligent, principled, and I didn't deserve you. When the door closed behind him, Sage remained still for a long time. Then she stood up and walked to the window. In the reflection, she saw a woman with a straight back and a calm look. A woman who had weathered the storm and remained firm. Her phone vibrated. A message from David. Sadi pleaded guilty. She will reach an agreement with the investigation. Sage smiled. She had a lot of work ahead of her, rebuilding the gallery's reputation. Examining all the deals, establishing new contacts. But now it was clear. Something new could be built from the fragments of her old life. And the new might be even better than the old. The autumn of that year was unusually beautiful. The maple leaves, flaming in all their shades of gold and scarlet, lined the sidewalk in front of the Montgomery Gallery. Sage looked out the window of her office and watched as the wind played with the fallen leaves. Many things had changed in the last 3 months since the Sadi scandal. She and her team had done an enormous amount of work. Every painting, every document had been examined meticulously. Some clients refused to cooperate, but most appreciated the honesty and frankness with which the gallery addressed the problem. Mrs. Montgomery, Martha poked her head through the door. The journalist from Art Review is waiting in the conference room. Sage nodded, adjusting the pearl brooch on her jacket lapel. It was her first major interview since the scandal. The young journalist, Rachel Parker, had proven to be surprisingly insightful. Many galleries close after stories like this. How did you manage not only to survive, but also to strengthen your position? Sage thought for a moment. When something important in your life collapses, there are two paths, to collapse or to become stronger. We chose the second path, total transparency, honesty with our clients, a new authentication system, and a new direction for the gallery. Yes, Sage smiled. We have opened a department of contemporary art. Young artists, fresh ideas. Sometimes you have to lose something valuable to find the courage to keep moving forward. After the interview, she went down to the main gallery hall. There, they were preparing a new exhibition. The works of a young artist from Seattle whose paintings impressed Sage with their sincerity and depth. Eleanor, who had become her regular expert on the authenticity of the works, studied another painting. Impressive technique and no doubt about the authenticity. I know the artist personally. Thatcher now appeared at the gallery only occasionally, mainly to resolve financial issues. They maintained a correct business relationship, but the old cordiality was gone, and couldn't be. At night, Sage stayed late at the gallery. She loved that moment when the hustle and bustle of the day calmed down, and the paintings seemed to come alive in the soft light of the lamps. She took an old photograph from her desk drawer, of her and Thatcher, on the day of the gallery opening. Young, happy, full of hope. No regrets? Asked David, who had come to check on the progress of cooperation with the FBI on the new system of fighting forgery. Regret what? Not having tried to save my marriage? Many people would have done it. She shook her head. Some things are better left as they are. It's like with paintings, restoration only makes sense if the base is intact. She put the photograph in a drawer. On the table was a project for a new exhibition. They were planning a series of evenings dedicated to young American artists. What about your personal life? David asked cautiously. Sage smiled. You know, I suddenly realized that for the first time in 20 years, I could only think about myself. About what I like, about what I want. It's liberating. She walked to the window. The city sunset was full of lights, and there was something fascinating in their flicker. She had a whole life ahead of her. New, unexplored, full of possibilities. The next morning, Sage met with a young curator from New York to discuss the concept of future exhibitions. James Hawthorne proved to be an intelligent conversationalist with a great sense of humor. Their business breakfast quietly turned into a 3-hour conversation about art. You are an amazing woman, Mrs. Montgomery. He said goodbye. The way you have handled this whole story. Simply. Sage smiled. And you know, sometimes a crisis is the best thing that can happen to us. It makes us grow. Back at the gallery, she surprised Martha talking to the messenger. They had delivered her new catalogue. The glossy cover featured the work of the same artist from Seattle. It's beautiful, isn't it? Martha said, beaming. Mara handed her a copy. Sage ran her hand over the cover. New logo, new design, new concept. It was like her life. Time to pick up the pieces of the past and make something beautiful with them. She had much ahead of her. New exhibitions, new artists, new horizons, and somewhere beyond those horizons, her own happiness awaited her. Now it was clear to her. It would come. She just had to be ready. It had been exactly 1 year since that memorable evening at the Golden Lily. Sage was standing by the window of her office, watching the snowfall. There was something peaceful in the way the white flakes slowly descended to the ground, covering the city with a blanket of white. The Montgomery Gallery had been transformed over the year. New lighting, modern security systems, elegant glass showcases, but most importantly, it now breathed a special atmosphere that had been missing before, a mix of classic and modern, tradition and innovation. Sage picked up a heavy album from the bookshelf. A new gallery catalogue, freshly brought from the printer. On the cover was a collage of her best works. Inside was the story of the gallery, an honest account of the past year and how they had managed to rise again. You look beautiful, said a familiar voice from the door. James Hawthorne was leaning against the doorjamb with 2 cups of coffee in his hands. Over the past year, their cooperation had turned first into friendship and then into. Sage smiled, remembering their first real kiss 3 months ago, after the successful opening of a new exhibition. Have you seen the morning news? He asked, handing her the coffee. Siddy's verdict. Yes. Catherine Barton, alias Cassidy Blackwood, was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Her confession helped expose a whole network of art forgers. The newspapers said it was the biggest forgery case in 20 years. You know what's strange? Sage took a sip of her coffee. I don't feel any gloating or satisfaction. Just relief, like I've turned the last page of a bad book. Martha entered the office at that moment. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Thatcher is here. He says it's important. Sage nodded. Let him in. James squeezed her hand and left. Thatcher and he met at the door and exchanged discreet nods. Thatcher had changed over the year, grey hair at his temples. New wrinkles, but he still stood tall, although there was no trace of his old self-confidence. I've signed the papers. He left the folder on the table. I'm giving you my part of the gallery. Are you sure? Yes. He sat in her chair. You know, I've been thinking a lot this year. About us. About everything that happened. I was blinded, not so much by Sadie, but by my own ego. I felt I deserved something bigger. Something brighter. And in the end, I almost destroyed the most precious thing I had. Sage looked out the window in silence. The snow fell and fell. I saw the new catalogue. Thatcher continued. A wonderful job. The gallery has flourished under your direction, and I saw you with James. You look happy. I am happy, she replied simply. There was a knock at the door. It was Eleanor with the results of another exam. Oh, sorry. Is this a bad time? No, stay. Sage gestured for her to come in. We were talking about how the gallery had changed. Eleanor sat on the edge of the sofa. You know, in my career I've seen many galleries in crisis. But I've never seen a resurgence like this. You've created a unique system for authenticating works. Now other galleries are coming to you for advice. And all thanks to you. She stood up. Thatcher, you've not only saved our reputation but also that of many other galleries. David appeared at that moment. He was now a regular visitor. Not just for work. I have a meeting here. He smiled. By the way, Sage, do you remember the collector from Chicago that Sadie deceived? He called. He wants to collaborate with your gallery. The circle is closed, Sage said quietly. Thatcher headed for the door. I have to go. Good luck to you all. When he left, silence fell in the office. You know, Eleanor broke the silence. Sometimes you have to go through the pain to become stronger and wiser. David added, remember how you sat in my office a year ago? So lost, but determined. Sage smiled. I remember every moment of that time. And you know what? I'm grateful for that experience. It taught me to trust my intuition, not to be afraid of change, and to let go of the past. James reappeared at the door. Sorry to interrupt, but there are representatives from the Museum of Modern Art here about the joint exhibition. I'm coming. Sage stood up. Life goes on, doesn't it? In the afternoon, she and James walked through the snowy city. He took her hand, and that simple gesture made her feel warm. What are you thinking about? He asked. How strange life is. A year ago, I thought my world was falling apart. And today, she squeezed his hand. Today, I realized that it was not destruction, but transformation. They stopped in front of a gallery window. The lights flickered behind the glass, illuminating a new exhibition of works by young artists mixed with the classics. Beautiful, said James. And so are you. Sage looked at her reflection in the window. She had changed a lot this year. Not outwardly but inwardly. There was a new depth in her eyes, a serene confidence in her posture, a self-awareness. The snow continued to fall, covering the city with a blanket of white. There was a new year ahead, new projects, new horizons, and there was someone to share this new chapter of life with. Sage Montgomery smiled at her reflection. She finally understood the main thing. Sometimes you have to lose something valuable to gain something priceless, your true self. And that was the most beautiful image possible.